It is no secret that Adolf Hitler didn't trust or even like most of his generals and field marshals. The reasons were many and varied, from straightforward class envy, most of the World War II German officer class being just that, a class of often aristocratic scions of important German families, hence the proliferation of the nobiliary particle von in front of surnames, the vast majority of Hitler's top leaders. Another reason was Hitler's disdain for the German General Staff system of arguing a problem and then advancing varied opinions before forming a plan, and then devolving responsibility to carry out that operation to subordinate commanders. Hitler increasingly enjoyed micromanaging his armed forces, showing a lack of trust in his generals and a distinct disinterest in having his ideas challenged or debated. This micromanagement led to the rather ludicrous situation of Hitler, a man who had never risen any higher in the army than the US equivalent rank of private first class, abolishing the division between political leadership and military leadership, when in 1938 he engineered the dismissal of his actual Minister of War, Field Marshal Werner von Blomberg, Hitler merging his position as Reich Chancellor with that of War Minister to become Führer and Supreme Commander of the Wehrmacht. This is a man who never held a commission in the army, had no staff training, and could not at best be described as anything more than a gifted amateur after taking all the credit for conquering Poland and France in 1939-40, although at this early stage of the war generals were largely responsible for the German victories, taking into consideration a few clever ideas proposed by Hitler. However, Hitler's alleged military genius soon began to fail him once the Wehrmacht embroiled itself in the Soviet Union. And so Hitler's interference with operations and ridiculous orders only got worse as the war progressed, leading to some almighty cock-ups that actively shortened the war and hastened Germany's defeat. Little wonder that some of those Vons Hitler disdained so much eventually tried to kill the Führer and take over the running of the war completely before Germany was destroyed and occupied by the Allies. However, the German resistance, such as it was, did not manage to remove Hitler from power and paid the price for its failure following the 1944 July bomb plot, when Hitler unleashed a reign of terror on the German officer class, effectively stifling any dissent until war's end. But it has always been interesting to note why so many well-trained and experienced generals went along with Hitler's lunatic military leadership for so many years, and seemed to be so loyal despite the horrific loss of life among German troops. The answer appears to have been nothing to do with loyalty to Hitler or the regime. It was instead something more dispiritingly human: greed. For what many people don't realize is that Hitler was bribing his top generals to keep them on his side and fighting the battles he wanted. An elaborate system of monetary bribes was established that soon had the field marshals and the top generals suckling at the National Socialist teat. Now, before continuing, we must understand that a ruler handing out rewards of one description or the other happens under every political regime on earth. Whilst almost everyone receiving an honour or an award is well deserved, there have been cases in democracies where scandals are broken out concerning behaviour that appears to skirt the law. We even had a scandal recently termed by the press cash for honours. History gives us numerous examples of individuals who have pleased some monarch or other and finding themselves awarded a shiny new title, an estate, or both. This is, after all, how Winston Churchill's family rose to prominence in Britain when his ancestor John Churchill won a very important battle for the king and was elevated to being the Duke of Marlborough, and so handsomely financially rewarded that he built the ostentatious Blenheim Palace, where Winston Churchill would be born centuries later. However, in both the cases I've outlined, the modern honours lists and the case of the first Duke of Marlborough, these honours were publicly given. Hitler, however, made such gifts in secret, and though not technically illegal, they nonetheless had about them the whiff of corruption. Hitler was buying his generals' loyalty. So how was it done? The chief of the Reich Chancellery, Hans Lammers, created a secret slush fund codenamed Konto 5, initially with a budget in 1933 of 150,000 marks. By 1945, Konto 5 had a budget of an astonishing 40 million Reichsmarks. During World War II, the Reichsmark had a rough exchange value of 2.5 Reichsmarks to $1, giving us a 1945 value for the Konto 5 slush fund of $16 million, or at today's values in 2024, $276 million. There was no oversight of this fund by any part of the government, and payments only required Hitler's approval. Interestingly, following Hitler's reorganization of the armed forces in 1938 and his assuming the position of Commander-in-Chief and Führer, he declared that the service chiefs were to have the same rank as cabinet ministers and were to be paid the same, plus the Konto 5 payments under the table. These officers were General Wilhelm Keitel, Chief of the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, the OKW, General Walter von Brauchitsch, Chief of the Oberkommando des Heeres, the OKH, the Army High Command, Field Marshal Hermann Göring, head of the Luftwaffe, and Grand Admiral Erich Raeder of the Kriegsmarine. In 1940, 3 of them were promoted again, Keitel and von Brauchitsch to the rank of Field Marshal and Göring to Reichsmarschall. In addition to their service salaries, all officers of the rank of Field Marshal or Grand Admiral received a monthly tax-free payment of 4,000 Reichsmarks from the Konto 5 slush fund, while other generals received 2,000 Reichsmarks. So a Field Marshal could expect to receive under this system 48,000 Reichsmarks of additional off-the-books income per year, or at 2024 prices about $336,000. But this wasn't all. Hitler usually ensured that the field marshals and the grand admirals received special annual birthday presents of 250,000 Reichsmarks each, tax-free. That's an astonishing $1.7 million in 2024. So let's find out exactly how much your average German field marshal could earn from this system each year. His state salary was 26,000 Reichsmarks, and his monthly Konto 5 payments totaled 48,000 Reichsmarks a year, plus a birthday gift of 250,000 Reichsmarks. In today's money, that is about $2.2 million in total. They were also given numerous exemptions from paying taxes, in addition to all the allowances that they received as well. Before this scheme began paying, the senior officer would have a private meeting with Lammers, who would outline the payments available and make it absolutely clear that the Konto 5 cash was dependent on continual loyalty to the Führer. They were told that the payments could be removed for failure to be loyal. Lammers also told them not to tell anyone about the payments and to keep minimal written records on these transactions. Therefore, is it any wonder that the Third Reich's top military leaders failed to remove Hitler, even though many opportunities presented themselves? It is interesting to note that few generals and field marshals seem to have associated themselves with the July plot and the German resistance more widely, when you look at just how many men held senior rank in the German armed forces in World War II. Many of them were subsequently prosecuted and even killed after the failure of the July plot because of very tangential evidence and very distant links to German resistance organizations, or even anti-Hitler comments that they had made in private. Historians have evidence that right up to the war's end, field marshals, both serving and retired, continually contacted Lammer's office to ensure that their slush fund payments went to the right bank accounts as the Allies began to overrun Germany. These men, despite their stiff-necked Prussian officer background and demeanors and often disdain for Hitler, were corrupt. Some were more corrupt than others. But the act of taking such payments from Hitler eliminated their independence and corrupted their judgment, and their greed allowed them to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of their own soldiers to ensure that their secret stipends continued. Interestingly, Erwin Rommel appears to have been one of the few German senior officers not to have taken the huge Konto 5 birthday gifts, though it is suspected he did receive the monthly stipends. Some of the other examples found by historians are particularly egregious. Walter von Brauchitsch divorced his wife in 1938 to marry a younger woman. Hitler used taxpayers' money to pay von Brauchitsch's entire divorce settlement, up to 250,000 Reichsmarks. Heinz Guderian was told in 1943 that he could select an estate for himself in Poland. After several visits, he selected a 937-hectare estate, and it was duly confiscated from its owner and given to Guderian, tax-free for his lifetime. This was an interesting gift, as previous to receiving the estate, Guderian had been opposing Hitler's new Operation Zitadelle, the offensive at Kursk on the Eastern Front. Once the estate was his, Guderian suddenly changed his mind about Zitadelle and supported it vociferously. Interestingly, officers who were critical of Hitler, including very senior generals, often received bigger Konto 5 payments, including Erich Raeder and Gerd von Rundstedt. Grand Admiral Raeder was particularly greedy, continually hassling Hitler for more money and more estates. Some field marshals and generals were financially penalized, as Lammers had warned them, due to their disloyalty. For example, when Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus surrendered to the Soviets at Stalingrad in January 1943, his Konto payments continued to his family. But then they were abruptly stopped in August 1943 after the Soviets had persuaded Paulus to appear on the radio, where he had correctly blamed Hitler for the defeat. The biggest number of field marshals and generals to lose their Konto 5 payments were those who had of course involved themselves in the July plot, or had been accused of having involved themselves in the July plot. The families of Field Marshal Günther von Kluge and General Franz Halder and Fritz Fromm no longer receive payments after being implicated. Field Marshal Erwin von Witzleben, a retired officer, was executed for his part in the plot, and his family was ordered to repay substantial amounts of bribes that he had received. After the war, the surviving field marshals and generals were brought to account by the Allies, and many stood trial for war crimes committed by units under their command.
I erred. I was not able to prevent what should have been prevented. That is my guilt. I can only wish that out of a clear recognition of the causes, of the disastrous methods, and the terrible consequences of this war, there will arise for the German people a new hope for a better future and a community of nations.
When the Konto 5 slush fund bribes came up in court, these seemingly respectable and honourable military officers came up with every excuse under the sun to justify the payments, embarrassing themselves very badly in open court. It is the oldest story of all, the corrupting power of money. All you had to do as a German general or field marshal in order to achieve huge wealth under the Nazi system was to yell the phrase "Zu Befehl, mein Führer." Thanks for watching, please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.